Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Pray that you're well and in good health, inshallah ta'ala aziz. Now, very, very recently, I posted a update on Instagram and TikTok about the 24-hour nikah, the nikah that lasted for less than 24 hours. Now, to make it fundamentally clear and absolutely clear from the get-go, that is not a nikah of mut'ah, that is not a nikah of muwaqqat. This was a nikah that genuinely only lasted 24 hours, and it was conceived on the basis that this will be a lifetime thing. And often when people get married, the understanding is that they're entering into this contract, they're entering into this relationship as a lifelong commitment. And, illa masha'Allah, whatever happens throughout the course of that journey, people generally expect to be together for the duration of the term, certainly in the case of this couple, from their early years all the way through to old age, if Allah grants them life that long. So the starting point of the conversation is that this was one of those nikahs. It wasn't a nikah for mut'ah, which we don't do. It wasn't a nikah for muwaqqat, which we don't do. It wasn't a misyar, which we don't do. Anything like this, right? We only deal with bona fide, genuine marriage and marriage inquiries, right? And we vet as much as possible both the bride and the groom, their circumstances and their situation, to make sure that first of all there's religious eligibility and that we are able to perform the nikah. And secondly, even though shar'an they may be ahl for the nikah, according to the sharia, they may be eligible to have the nikah performed. Well, actually, is it right for the bride, the groom, and the respective stakeholders in that relationship, or will it cause lots of drama in their lives? Will it be to their detriment? So we do the religious checks, and then we also have a look at the social aspects of it and whether or not there's sustainability in that relationship and whether or not we can see that. And there's been so many examples throughout the years that we've been doing this, the too many to list, but not every inquiry leads to a nikah, and not every person that wants to get married is a nikah that we will perform, because we can see that nikah isn't right for them, right? And within that, there's a responsibility that we have as an organization to make sure that we do the right thing for both bride and groom, but also we're accountable to Allah Azza wa Jalla on the day of our resurrection, on the day of our judgment, to make sure that we protected people as best as possible and we didn't exploit the construct and the institution that Allah has created, because fundamentally this is a critical act of worship, and there is accountability for all parties involved to maintain the sanctity of one of the greatest signs that Allah Azza wa Jalla has created. And this is what Allah mentions in the Quran, right? وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُم. In Surah Al-Rumr specifically talks about companionship, that from the indicators and the signs of Allah, this is the deity that's created all of these miraculous, beautiful and amazing things, comprehensible and also non-comprehensible, things that can't even enter into our minds and that we can't even conceptualize. Allah Azza wa Jalla has created, and within that he speaks about specifically marriage as one of his signs, right? So it is a shi'ar from the sharia of Islam, from the deen of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and sanctity of that is so important, and accountability to that will inevitably come our way, and also to the way of the people who have engaged in this sacred contract. So the 24-hour nikah, after all that kind of monologue, what happened, and to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure myself. So we took a booking from a relatively young couple, and we generally have a principle now based upon the years of experience that we've been doing this, that typically we won't get people married under the age of 25, because unless they have family support, because there's so much immaturity in the world, there's so much immaturity in terms of roles and responsibilities and expectations that we see within younger people, just with the outlooks that they have on the world, what their expectations are, the initial conversations, you can get a gauge for how these people are interacting. If they have their support of their family behind them, then we can say that, okay, they're on a learning journey, inshallah ta'ala aziz, but they've got a network behind them and they'll help nurture that relationship. And it's almost like an incubation period where it develops from infancy and it becomes, inshallah, flourishing, and it's beautiful for everybody to be a part of, to observe and to witness. both from the bride and groom and their respective families. But we also recognise that's not the world that we live in. The number of inquiries that we've taken from young sisters, subhanAllah, who have come from broken homes, who have come from fractured families, who have come from social services care, all kinds of abuse, historical, documented, physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, subhanAllah, sexual abuse by members of their own families. It's incomprehensible. And this is the reality of the world that we live in, and this is the reality of the world that people are wedding into or wedding out of. And as much as we try to make sure that those checks and balances are in place, that's a consequence of dialogue that we have with the bride and groom. And we're subject to the truthfulness of the people that present their cases to us and the circumstances that they outline to us. But typically, all that said, if it's less than 25, unless they've got family support, we won't really perform the nikah. So this young couple are at that kind of threshold. They're in that mid-20s kind of threshold, right? And they contact us and they say that, listen, we'd like to have our nikah performed. We'd like to do it online, and we've been in a relationship for X amount of time, and there are some complications, more so with the bride side, but generally speaking, the groom's stating that my family's not overly happy, but they're not obstructive, or they're not they're not unsupportive. So can we go ahead and have our nikah performed? And with any inquiry of such a nature, I'm always keen to understand both sides of the conversation. So if there's a dysfunctional element, we need to understand what that is. So we have a conversation with the bride, and she raises some significant safeguarding issues from her family side, to such an extent that she's estranged now from her family. And there were various different organizations involved in protecting her throughout the course of her journey to this point. Some of them were statutory, some of them perhaps not so. But needless to say, she was very much on her own, right? No kind of wali, father figure, no immediate support network and family. And that in and of itself is a real indicator of vulnerability and potential vulnerability, particularly when it comes to young women, right, that don't have that support network behind them. And there's an element potentially, or a fear or a concern of exploitation. Are these young women, is this young lady in particular at risk of being exploited? So if we're taking her out of one danger element because of safeguarding, is there potentially another danger element because of vulnerability towards exploitation? So we have these conversations and we pad them out, and we discuss in detail. And I was part of those conversations with this young lady as well. And probably one of the most sweetest and well-mannered young individuals that you will ever have the privilege to meet and have a conversation with. So at the end of that conversation, we decided that, right, okay, well, it's not an ideal situation that you're in, but we also appreciate that the world isn't perfect, far from it. So as long as you've got support nominally from one side of the family, then inshallah ta'ala Aziz would be happy to perform the nikah. And that was the pretext, that was the background to the nikah. So we perform the nikah on the day, and it's just the bride and groom. And the groom suggests that because the family is not necessarily overly happy with the marriage, that they're not going to be attending, right? And that was really the first kind of in the back of my mind, right? Around, well, hold on. If you're getting married and it is one of the most significant days within your life for so many people, right? Across the board. You're telling me that there's not one or two people that can come to your nikah? There's not a friend or a cousin or a brother or a relative or somebody that is willing to participate in your nikah, accepting warts and all that they may be begrudged to do so, but is there nobody that's happy for you, right? And there was a slight challenge, but in the context of what we've worked in and through over the past several years, it's not uncommon, unfortunately. It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for folks to say, well, actually, we're going to disengage, because although we're not going to be active obstructors in your relationship, we can't be willfully happy for you. And it's just sad. It's just sad to see on the days when people are getting married, sometimes folks are very much alone. And we've had it throughout the course of the years. So although it was interesting. It's not, unfortunately, unusual. So we perform the nikah. And in this nikah, right, the bride and groom are conversing. They're talking about, their life plans. They're talking about, when Hajj and Umrah together, inshallah ta'ala aziz. And the groom is very much invested in this conversation. He's very much a part of it. Very much laying down life plans, looking forward to next Ramadan, inshallah, and how good it would be. And I'm hearing this and I'm thinking, alhamdulillah, it's so sweet to hear so many young couples trying to start off on this journey of their lives. And I pray for them, I pray that Allah protects them, I pray that Allah looks after them. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them, all the joy and the happiness and the prosperity in the world that they deserve. And it sounds as though they've kind of found the right person for one another based upon certainly what I was hearing. So the nikah's performed and it's happy and they're both happy and they go offline, and this is roughly at about, let's just say, 2 o'clock in an afternoon on any given day. 24 hours later, I receive a message from the bride. And the bride says that, Sheikh, I really need your help. I really need your help. He's going to divorce me. He's going to divorce me. And my mind's, I'm in the middle of something else. I look at this and I think, is this the same person? What in God's name's happened? And the young lady calls me and she's distraught. She's in bits, saying that I don't understand what's happened. I don't know why this has happened. I don't know what he's doing and this, that and the other and all the rest of it. And I go, well, tell me what the background is. Tell me what the background is. There must be some sort of background to this. And it materialises that the young man wasn't entirely truthful with us. He didn't. He told us that his family were supportive of the nikah, if not necessarily overly happy with his choice. But it materialises that they were completely unaware. And I think what he tried to do was take the plunge and hope that everything would work out in the fullness of time and in his disclosure to his family that he'd married a young girl of his choice. And he ended up taking her home and things just blew up from there. And it was probably one of the most horrible environments that young lady, for the time that she was there, could have potentially been in, because I had the misfortune of speaking with one of his family members in relation to the nikah itself. And that's how you realise, or when you realise, how significant family is in pulling the strings that control people. So this young man didn't have the resolve, he didn't have the fortitude, he didn't have the courage, just, there's no other way of describing it, to commit to the decision that he'd made. He'd chosen to take this young lady into his life. He'd chosen to marry her, knowing that his family weren't necessarily supportive, knowing, not disclosing it to us, but knowing that he hadn't told them, and there would probably be some pushback, maybe significant, from his family's side. But he didn't have the strength, he didn't have the courage, he didn't have the brass, for want of a better expression, to stick to the decision that he'd made and to honour the sanctity of the relationship that he'd entered into with this young girl. And often it's different for women than it is for men, because of the stigma that comes with failed relationships, because of the stigma that comes with failed marriage. And this is a stigma that socially men seem to be more easily able to shift comparatively to women. Young women carry that stigma throughout the course of their life, from one relationship into another. And this is not even acknowledging the emotional trauma when you've invested months and months and months and months into somebody, and you've built all these plans, and you've got to the point where you're going to get married, and you actually speak about it, you plan it, you make the arrangements, you do the logistics, and then you do get married, and literally within 24 hours the guy bolts on you, does a U-turn, because he's buckled under the pressure that his family have put on him. He wasn't man enough, for want of a better expression, to honour the decisions that he's made. And that's really what happened. And it was as a consequence of the pressure from his family that he chose, within 24 hours, to divorce this young lady. And he sent her a message, which she shared with me over WhatsApp, and it was clinical. It was absolutely clinical. within 24 hours. It's certainly the shortest nikah that I have ever known of. Certainly that we've been involved in primarily firsthand in terms of organising and performing, but then also in picking up the pieces. And we're still picking up the pieces in that young lady's life, because how does she make sense of that? How does she compute, understand, and reconcile what's actually happened to her in this? I don't even know what to call it. In this experience, whether it's a charade, whether it's a facade, whatever happens. I mean, my personal belief is that the young man was well intended at the start of the conversation. I think he underestimated and was incredibly naive the pressure that his family would put on him and the challenge that they would present to him and his wife in that relationship. And I think he underestimated the size of the task at hand, and he thought naively that he would be able to navigate it, but he wasn't able to do so. So what he ended up doing was capitulating to his family's demands, and he divorced her after 22, 23 hours of their nikah. Divorced her. And now we're left picking up the pieces with this young girl, and she's contacting us every day, every other day, just to try and make sense of it. And there's various different. You can't just move on. This is what people don't understand. You just can't move on when you've invested so much into somebody and you've married them. You made that commitment for like the English say. For better or for worse, sickness and health, richer or poorer. These are all tenets of nikah as well, right? There's fundamentally no different. We don't say those vows, but it's assumed within the notion of the relationship that come hell or high water, thick or thin love, I'm with you, right? And we'll do this together. And fundamentally, that's what marriage is, and that's what she invested and signed up for. And I think that he wanted that as well, but he wasn't able to deal with the pressure from his family. So it's so important that when you're getting married, that you have that support from your families, because they can either make your relationship or they can break your relationship. And it's a real difficult road of recovery, and it won't be easy. And we've covered this in some of our other videos as well, people who go down these lines and they end up in situations where the relationship has failed, carry so much trauma, and introduce that into their lives, carry that throughout their lives. And it takes such a big piece of them, and it takes so long for them to heal and move forward from that it almost becomes defining for some people, right? So the 24-hour nikah, a horrible experience for that young lady, to a degree for that young man as well. I have some sympathy for him, although not that much. Horrible people around him, just in my conversation with them. It was very, very, very visceral. But yeah, this is the world that people are trying to navigate, and it really makes me worry and concerned about the future for our young people. And I make constant dua to Allah Azza wa Jalla that He protects our families, He protects our daughters and sons and our children, and that He allows them to find righteous partners, righteous families, God-fearing people that are conducive to the betterment of their deen, conducive to the betterment of their dunya, and relationships that allow one another to grow, and they give part of themselves for that to happen, as opposed to relationships that strip away and take chunks out of people. May Allah protect us all, inshallah ta'ala aziz. May He forgive us for our sins and our shortcomings. May He guide us and protect us, and particularly for the young women out there, always protect your izzah, always protect your izzah. If you have a wali or a custodian, and that's the principal reason why the wali exists in the Sharia in the first place, to watch out for you, to defend your corner, then take their counsel, take their advice. I understand that that's not always possible, as the experiences of this young lady seem to suggest that the wali doesn't always necessarily have the best interests of the people that they have responsibility for at heart. But the general rule is that they do, and the general principle is that they do, and also the general experience is that parents always want the best for their children. They don't want to necessarily see bad for them or cause them harm. So if you're lucky enough to have that within your life, use that safeguard, take their counsel, and proceed with their support. May Allah protect us all, inshallah ta'ala aziz, and continue to make dua for that young couple who find themselves in a very, very challenging period at this moment in time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.